Welcome to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast, where we break down the complex and emotional process of divorce into manageable, easy-to-understand steps. I'm your host, Greer Howard, and with me is Bobby Buchanan, widely recognized as one of Illinois' top divorce attorneys, offering unmatched insight and experience in family law. Well, welcome back to another episode, and today we are getting into the nitty-gritty of child support. It is often the most understood, the most complained about thing when it comes to divorce, so Bobby and I today are going to break it down. We're actually going to show you the numbers. We're going to pull out the Illinois calculator so you can actually see for yourself how the numbers work. And it's going to get a little spicy because Bobby has a little bit of beef with a few of the ways that this calculator works, don't you, Bobby?
Absolutely, Greer. Good to be here and dive into this topic because it's certainly one that I have an opinion on as far as what the law is and how it works, and you'll understand it backwards and forwards by the time we're done with this. And so I'm excited to just dive in, look at some real examples and explore kind of what the law is and how people can use it to their advantage. Although I even hate to say that, because when it comes to child support and overnights and co-parenting, I don't like the idea of us negotiating how many overnights we have in order to lower our child support or vice versa. It really shouldn't be about that. It should be about what is best for the child. But unfortunately, the way the law is, it kind of incentivizes that. So as a lawyer, my job is to know what the law is and how it works in different scenarios. And that's what I'm going to teach today.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I like to think of it as like what is fair and what's best for the child, what's fair for the co-parents and what's best for the child. But today we're gonna dive in with the calculator. We're just gonna start with an example. So I'm gonna kind of set up this example and we're gonna break it down a few different ways so that everyone can kind of understand how this works. Now, Bobby, you've actually pulled up the calculator here today, which is awesome. So we have that reference. But in our first example, we have parent A. Now, parent A has a $5,000 a month. That's gross income. And that parent has the children 220 nights out of the year. Now, then parent B has a gross income monthly of 12,000 and has the children 145 nights a year. And there are 3 kids in this scenario. So, Bobby, you have your calculator pulled up here and you can find it online. Can you input some of these numbers and show us what that looks like in this particular scenario?
Absolutely. Let's break it down. And before we do, let me just show people real quickly how I got to this calculator. So
Yeah.
I just Googled Illinois child support calculator, and it is the first one on this list here. We're actually looking at the attorney version, and certainly you can look at that one as well. If you want to get the attorney version, you can just pull it up by clicking on this link, or this one is for parents. This is the parents one. It's just kind of a little bit more of a workflow. It pushes you through, asks you questions. But this one is easier for attorneys because we kind of know the questions to ask ourselves. So
Right.
with that said, let's just put this data in here. With the number of children we have is 3. The number of overnights with the custodial parent. Custodial parent just basically means the parent with more overnights. So that's 220. And then we have the gross income for the custodial parent. That's CP right here is going to be 5,000. And then the non-custodial parent is going to be 12,000 per month. One thing to point out, or a few things to point out as we calculate this, it's actually based on, so we have the income shares model in Illinois, which means that we add up the incomes of both parties. We're actually not adding the gross income, we're adding the net income, but the calculator uses a standardized determination for coming up with net income. If because of your tax situation, it's more beneficial to use an individualized determination, that can be done as well. But I would say 99% of cases, we're just using the standardized determination. So the calculator is going to make that calculation coming down to net income. For the purposes of this lesson, this is kind of child support 101. We're not going to do the other variables, which could be maintenance. If one side is receiving maintenance in this case, that's going to be inputted as well. And if there are children outside of the marriage, that could affect the child support as well as health insurance, childcare, extracurriculars. And we'll touch on that a little bit more later. So just for this base example, let's take a look at what the child support amount would be. And drum roll.
Drum roll, please.
It
The
is.
number is,
Go ahead.
all right, so $2,226.97 to the cents. I like it.
To the cent, yeah. So it's not an insignificant amount, sure, but that is our baseline, and that's based on this individual who's going to be paying them making $12,000 per month gross, and them having 145 overnights per year.
Okay. All right. That's a pretty good, yeah. I mean, that's a decent number. I mean, and what's interesting is I kind of think about it as like, okay, so the person making, the 12,000 now goes down to a little under 10, maybe like 9,800 ish,
Yeah.
and then the other person now has, a little over 7,000, to spend. So they're kind of they're like closing in that gap a little bit, right? Because you are trying to make sure that the kids have a similar lifestyle at both of the homes. That is part of why we're doing this, right, Bobby?
Yeah, absolutely. The purpose of child support is to make sure that the lifestyle that the child enjoys at one parent isn't extremely different from what they enjoy at the other parent's
Right.
house. Now, we all might have some strong feelings about whether or not that is enough or not enough, whether child support is fair, it's not fair. And I often tell people, I hear what you're saying, but there's nothing I can do about it. As a lawyer, I work within the law, what the law is. If you want the law to change, then you become a politician, and you're, in Springfield, if we're talking Illinois, and you're working to change the law. But the way it is, we got to work within the framework that we have. It doesn't matter the feelings that we have about the framework itself. So that's the reality of getting through these cases, is we kind of have to accept the hand we're dealt when we go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to move along to where it gets weird, Bobby, and where I know you have some feelings. So let's say that, so in this current scenario, if parent A has the 220 nights, that means that parent B would have had 145 nights. And that is in this scenario, when you're talking about a 365, day calendar year. So when it flips just one night and
Yeah.
parent B, let's say that parent B now has 146 nights, how does that child support change for parent A? So instead of having the 220 nights, they have 219. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So we're taking a look here at if the non-custodial parent gets one more overnight per year.
Mhm.
And we're going
Okay.
to take a look at what this does per month for child support. And I'll just pull it up here so we can kind of rip the Band-Aid off and see exactly what this is. But boom, there it is. It's
Oh,
about
wow.
it's
Oh
a
my gosh.
$900 difference that we're talking about.
Wow. Okay, so that is 1,376? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
1,376. Okay. Yeah. 0.06. Yeah, that's a big difference. That's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference, and
Yeah.
it's per month. So if we pull up, just quickly a calculation here. Actually, we'll pause this for the L.
Yeah, so
Let
I
me
mean, if that's over 18 years every month, Bobby, can you do that math for me? Let's see.
Here, we're gonna do it right now. But actually,
See if
I'm gonna tell the editor to just cut into this because.
yeah, so like let's see.
So, okay, so this is a huge difference, and let's just take a look at what this is over the course of 18 years or just a
Yeah.
year. So I think the previous number that we worked with was about 2,200.
Yeah. Well, in this current scenario, if you had 2,226 minus 1,376, that's 850
Yeah, so
times 12 is 10,200 a year times 18 is 183,600.
yeah.
Wow.
So it's your math was more accurate than mine because I was rounding, but yeah, we're talking about $180,000 over the course of the child's entire life
Yeah.
based on 18 nights. That just doesn't add up.
That's crazy.
It doesn't make any sense. But that's the way the child support law is written. And specifically, what this calculator is doing is once you get to 40% of overnights or more, the formula changes.
Right.
And so it makes it so the payout is significantly reduced. So what ends up happening in the real world is you get people fighting over that 146 overnight, 145 overnight threshold, and they lose sight of like, does that make sense for the kid? And that's,
Right.
kind of a natural thing that's going to happen because it is a lot of money.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, it is what it is. Hopefully they change this law sooner rather than later, but it's been around for more than a few years at this point.
Mhm.
But I do have some faith that that is going to change. But right now, that's what the law
That's
says.
what it is. And I wanna make something clear here, Bobby, and maybe you could clarify this for us. When you are going through this process of the divorce, you're gonna go through this calculator, you're going to come up with that number. But that number is going to stay because it's not like every year you're like you have this like journal and you're writing, well, these are the days that I had them and you're trying to conspire to get one extra day and then all of a sudden you don't pay the same amount. Like whatever you decide during this time is what it is unless you go back to court. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct. So, unless it changes drastically, if let's say that you do end up on the side of having less than 40% overnights and you end up with this larger child support number, then you start actually practicing your co-parenting after the divorce is over and you guys start doing a 50-50 schedule because maybe you moved, you don't want to go back to court, and I applaud people for not going back to court and just making it work. But you might end up in a situation where you're have 50% of the overnights but you're still paying this child support amount, and that's a personal decision. You
Mhm.
might your income might be increasing and maybe that $2,000 a month isn't such a big deal, and just maintaining the peace between you and the other parent is more important to you, and the fact that you have 50% of the overnights, which is ultimately what you wanted. So it doesn't make sense to go back to court to reduce it, but technically you could. So yeah, I think your point is don't be thinking this is easy to change. And that's
Right.
exactly what it is. This is not
Right.
an easy number to change, whether you ultimately want to or not. Once this number is locked in, I would count on it staying the same, because changing it's either going to be a lot of attorney's fees, a lot of goodwill with the other side, or both, and no guarantee that it actually does change.
Right. Right. Okay, so Bobby, let's move to another scenario, same A and B parent situation, same salaries, what's coming in every month, but let's say it is a 50-50
Yes.
schedule. So if it's a 50-50 schedule, what does then the child support look like for the parent that doesn't make as much money?
Yeah. So let's recap. So at the kind of the every other weekend scenario that we did to start, that was
Mhm.
our custodial or non-custodial parent was paying about 2,200 a month.
Mhm.
Then we switched it one overnight and that went down to 1,300 per month. And now we're going to look at 50-50. And I guess the question of what a lot of people assume is going to happen here is this is going to go down to 0 because, hey, it's a 50-50 schedule. It's probably going to go down to 0, right? Well, no.
Yeah, but it's not a 50-50 income, Bobby.
That's right. It's not a 50-50 income. So
Yeah.
we're still paying that person who's making the $12,000 per month is still going to be paying child support. It is going to be less, it's approximately $900 per month that
Okay.
they're paying instead of $1,300 or even $2,200, but they are paying something. If we'll just put this in quickly so you can see, if they are making the same amount of income, which we just put.
Oh, yeah. Now then what happens? Now
Yeah,
it's nothing.
right.
Okay.
It's
So only if you have 50-50 custody and you make the same amount of money, then there's no child support involved. Probably.
exactly. There's actually, and this is a quirk of I'd have to look a little deeper. There's actually a recommendation in this scenario that the custodial parent is paying $9.22. Don't ask me why.
Oh, wow.
I could probably spend, an hour trying to reverse engineer this to figure out exactly what is going on. But for
It's
all
charging you $9 for like just the calculator's time and effort here.
yeah, the convenience fee.
Yeah, exactly.
So for all intents and purposes, it's going to be 0 in that
Okay.
scenario. So
Yeah, okay, so I mean, that's it's really interesting to, like, see those numbers really laid out, really does make it clear of how it changes. The only one we haven't talked about, Bobby, is what if the higher income earner has more like the majority of the time? Like, what if it flips that way? What happens in that scenario?
all right, let's run through all of the scenarios so that we can see. So we're going to flip
Okay.
these numbers here. And first we'll do 220 overnight. So this is kind of
Okay, cool.
the higher earner is the majority.
The
The custodial parent, they're the one that has the kid,
Yes.
during the school week, they're getting them to school. So they are still going to be,
Wow.
they're going to be receiving child support, which is really interesting because before we
Isn't
talked about, well, the purpose of child support is to kind of equalize the lifestyle of the kids, but it's also wants to make sure that the parent doing the majority of the caretaking, because raising kids ain't cheap,
No.
has enough money to do that. So in this situation, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money for somebody that is bringing in $5,000 a month.
Absolutely, that is.
I mean, that significantly changes their,
Yeah,
like
which
living.
is hard because then you're like, well, what kind of place can they afford?
Right.
Like, it seems like the 3 kids are definitely going to have a different lifestyle when they're living at the parents' house who has kind of a net or a total income of like 13,000 a month versus this
Right.
like 4,000 a month. Those are 2 very different houses that can be afforded. So
Yes.
again, our opinion doesn't matter on this. This is just the reality of the
Yeah.
law. And
Matters to us, Bobby.
yeah.
Which means nothing.
Yeah. Um,
That's really interesting. I wasn't honestly expecting that. So that really surprised me.
yeah. So let's take a look at then what this looks like if we
When it goes to what
here, we'll do 50-50 first. We'll just kind of make our way down.
Okay.
Actually, let's do 219 first.
Yeah, the 219.
This is the one where we just get one more overnight. And look at that.
Oh, wow. Okay, so in that scenario, that makes a huge difference for those families. Wow.
Huge difference. And this
Yeah.
one more overnight, and now we have the custodial parent
Yeah.
paying the non-custodial parent
Yes. Okay.
$425. So
Yeah.
really,
That seems more fair to me.
that does seem more fair. Really interesting how much of a flip that is.
One night.
That's an even bigger flip than we talked about before. That's
Yeah.
a bit like almost a $1,500 difference.
Wow, that's huge. That's really big. Yeah.
All right, let's keep going down the ladder here and look at the 50-50.
Yeah, what's the 50-50 on it?
50-50 will be, yeah. So now the custodial
Okay.
is paying the custodial parent who earns substantially more is going to be paying the other parent
Okay.
910, and then we'll go that's all the way. So those are the three scenarios. So in
Okay.
one of the scenarios, in our scenario where custodial parent is clearly the primary caretaker, other parent is the every other weekend parent, that every other weekend parent is going to pay. But in every other scenario, they're going to be receiving some sort of child support.
Right. I have a really hard time with the one that the parent that isn't making nearly as much has to pay. That's tough. Wow.
Yeah, that is tough.
That's crazy.
Um, that is tough. And child support is really tough. Just even, if we look at this one, let's put both these parents at $6,000.
Mhm.
Um, and you know,
Oh,
that
wow, yeah.
that's 1380 per month, that the person who's making 6,000. Now, like we said, raising kids isn't cheap.
Mhm.
Whether or not that is too much or too little, I don't know, but I do know that it's expensive to
Yeah.
live these days, and
So expensive.
1380 per month is a lot. But you know what?
Yeah.
Judges don't care. I have been in court 1,000 times when they're there because someone hasn't paid child support, and the person is saying, "Well, I have all these other bills to pay," and the judge is saying, "Yeah, but those other bills aren't court ordered. Mine is
Oh.
court ordered. Like, this is the
Oh,
most important one you have to pay." So
wow.
child support is real, and there are real consequences if you don't pay it. So you got to make sure that you're doing everything you can to understand what you're getting into here. They should probably teach this in high school so kids know what happens if you get pregnant.
For sure, for sure. They should teach it in high school so that, kids are less likely to get pregnant. They should also make everyone who's getting married go through this course.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody everybody who does get pregnant, whether or not you're the mother or the father, to have
Yeah.
to go through this would be eye-opening, that's for sure.
It really would. And, I mean, we're really just scratching the surface here today, too, because, I think about, as someone that does co-parent and is raising a child with a co-parent, the child support is just like this one little piece because, you have to think about, who's paying for the health insurance for the child
Mhm.
and then who's paying for the bills if, there are, any kind of medical bills, who's paying for that? And then sports or any extracurricular activities. When my son was, not even 3 when we divorced, I would have no idea by the time he was a tween, he was gonna be so into sports and everything was gonna be so expensive. So,
Mhm.
there's all these things that it's not even just, "Oh, I've gotta be able to, like, provide meals and a roof." There's a lot of other things that come with raising a child, and then if you're thinking about the future, if you're thinking about potentially college or some of that, I mean, there's all of these factors that, your finances really affect, your child and the lifestyle that they're gonna be able to live. So, my brain just goes crazy because, there's just a lot to consider.
Absolutely, and we haven't even touched on any of that other stuff, the extracurriculars, the healthcare, the private school tuitions, the college contribution, and all of that stuff does play a part. Some of it is, like maintenance and the multifamily adjustment that we see here. That's gonna directly affect the child support amount, but in Illinois, the extracurriculars, that's just an add-on to child support. That's something that's
Mm.
going to be dealt with in addition to child support, as well as um, private school tuition and healthcare. The healthcare premium, as we can see here, that is something that's baked into the calculator as well. So, if the parent who's earning $5,000, if maybe they have that government job, as we know, like being a school teacher, sometimes there's fantastic health insurance benefits, or they have some other government job where the health insurance is great, or a private job as well. That can be a real benefit, because if they can get all 3 kids on their health insurance, that can get them a significant discount on the child support amount. So what would be $1,300 a month could go down to 500 or something, because they have all the kids on the health insurance.
Yeah, so it's important to think about all those things. Maybe that's another episode we can kinda dig into a little bit another time, but what would you say, Bobby, or maybe some strategies to, just I don't wanna say work the system, 'cause I don't know that that really makes sense, but, just some strategies to sort of make sure that it's fair, right? Like, what are some of the things that you should be doing, to kinda as you're working out this number with this calculator?
Yeah, I think the first thing is open up this calculator and play with the numbers and see what they actually are, so that you can have a clear understanding of this before you go into the conversation with your spouse or with the other parent of the child. So you know where your leverage is, and how these things work, and play with it before you talk to your attorney as well, so that you're kind of prepared for the type of strategy that they are going to recommend. The other thing is, before this all starts, you're going to want to document overnights. If you're already split and you're doing some co-parenting already, then you need to understand how many overnights do you actually have. You might think that you have 146 overnights per year, but when you start to really look at it, you don't. And so it might make sense for you to take more overnights. There might be a lot of scenarios where maybe you're saying, no, you can keep them this weekend. Like the other parent is saying, hey, can you take the kids this weekend? And you're not taking them as much as is being offered. Well, 6 months down the road, if you flip that and you do take them as much as offered, then you have a really good case to say, I absolutely have 146 overnights, and you have much better negotiation. So know that that to the parent who enjoys being the every other weekend parent, because hey, that might be great for some folks, that is going to affect your child support amount significantly. And again, I kind of hate to talk this way, because people shouldn't like making moves as far as how much you want the kids based on how much you would have to pay just doesn't feel right. It doesn't
Yeah, it
like,
feels gross.
yeah, it
Sure.
doesn't feel like in the spirit of like really raising your kids and loving your kids, but the reality is the reality. And then the last one is, don't if you are still living with the other parent, don't move out without a parenting plan or an understanding, because once you move out, you become you can become the de facto every other weekend parent, especially if the parent who stays in the house is kind of hell-bent on wanting to be the primary parent and limiting your time, and that relationship is kind of toxic at the moment. And if you don't trust that you're going to get that 50-50 schedule, then you have to be very careful about moving out.
For sure. And, something I just thought about, which maybe you could touch on real quick, is, we were sort of talking about, what someone could expect every month. But obviously, today, some people, their income varies every month, or maybe they get a big commission or a big bonus, at some point during the year. So, how are those scenarios typically handled?
The most common way we're going to handle that is do what's called a true up, which is we're going to set the child support based on the base salary, and then say, okay, when the bonus does come, a certain percentage of the bonus is going to be paid to the other parent as the child support amount. So usually that true up amount is going to be calculated and negotiated a bit, but that's how we're going to handle it, is some sort of true up. There's other ways to do it. You could average out what your take home pay for the last few years has been, and maybe negotiate a base child support amount based on that, and not do a true up. But when there are big fluctuations, and maybe you get your bonus this year, but you don't get it at all next year because of the state of the economy or your business, true up can be a better way to do it, to make sure that you're not having to dole out thousands of dollars in child support when you just don't have it.
Right, like, you didn't get like, last year you had this big bonus check, but this year you didn't get one, so yeah, no, that makes sense. And, before we go, any kind of pitfalls or, that people should be thinking about, potential problems?
Yeah, one is, and this is a hard one too, and one of the things that I think that the child support law needs to take into account better, but that is the scenario where there is a daytime parent and kind of an overnight parent. Maybe because of work schedules or whatever, you have one parent who is doing the heavy lifting as far as getting the kids to school, getting them home after school, watching them, making them dinner, and then the other parent, they do a pickup after dinner and then they do overnights, but that's about it. It's like, well, under the law, that overnight parent is going to have a significant advantage as far as child support, but that doesn't seem fair or right, but it is what it is. So be careful of assuming that because you do the heavy lifting during the day, that the child support law is going to give you credit for that. It's usually not going to happen that way at all. The court does have the right to deviate. These are called guidelines. They're not black and white laws. They're called guidelines. And the court does have the power to deviate from these guidelines and do something different. But it takes a lot for a judge to deviate from these guidelines. And a lot really, really means a lot. Like your scenario, you might think it's special, but it's probably not. So I would bank on the guidelines being put in place, and you can talk to your lawyer about whether or not it makes sense to litigate over the guidelines and deviating over the guidelines. Sometimes it does, but those are rare exceptions. And then I would say the two other ones are, and these are related, failing to file for modifications, like if your income does substantially change or your overnights do substantially change. If you don't file for a modification, you can't go back in 5 years and say, well, my income changed 5 years ago, so I shouldn't be on the hook. So let's say your income changes, it goes down, and then you get behind in child support. And then a year later, the other parent brings you back to court and says, this person owes me 50 grand or 20 grand. You can't say to the court, well, my income changed a year ago. I want to retroactively lower my child support. That doesn't happen. You need to go into court immediately when there is a change in circumstances. On the flip side, and pitfalls come on in both angles here, don't nickel and dime the other side. I think that there is great value in staying out of court. If we're talking about the best interest of the child, we're talking about a co-parenting relationship that's healthy and collaborative, and two parents are working together, and going back into court to make a modification can really make that suffer. So unless there is some significant financial or other reason go back into court, you might just have to swallow the fact that you're getting the short end of the stick for the sake of your child having a healthy co-parenting relationship.
Yes, absolutely, Bobby. Well, Bobby, thanks so much as always for all of your insight today. And if you have any questions about child support, we encourage you to go ahead and just run that calculator, work through some of those numbers. You can talk to an attorney, of course. And if you have any other questions that you want us to answer, please feel free to reach out, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast. We hope today's episode gave you clarity and support as you move forward on your journey. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Tune in next week for more insights and expert advice on the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast.